Alrighty, so we finished off on number 6, and we listed the answer as 4x cubed minus 35x squared plus 40x minus 12. Again, that's after we combined like terms. So the domain, since we're multiplying, we do not have a denominator. We don't have any special cases where potentially a denominator, something's being divided by 0. Now, an answer can equal 0, totally fine, but we can't have a denominator of 0. So because of that, the domain is actually all real numbers, nothing special to it. Alright, so that was the first part of our lesson, all about operations with functions. Go ahead and flip the page, and you're going to see the second part. So we're finishing up operations with functions. We're going to do the same thing, but this time instead of x, you're going to notice we're having f plus g, the function f, plus the function g. But instead of x, we're going to have negative 2 in these equations. So we're going to have the function f of negative 2. I'm going to write down the function f, plug in negative 2 anywhere I see an x. Plus, I'm going to write down the function g, plug in negative 2 to anywhere I see x in that. And then we're going to add those two answers together. So the first one would look like, well, 2 times negative 2 squared minus, because that's what the function is, I put in parentheses a negative 2. Anything I'm plugging in the equation, I'm going to put in parentheses. So it's very clear what is new, what is added, what is being replaced. And then that way I don't miss something like this. A negative times a negative. Hey, that's going to make this going to be a positive 2. So I catch those little mistakes. Then I'm going to add, I'm going to plug in negative 2 to the function g. So really I have, instead of x, negative 2 plus 7. Okay, so we got to keep simplifying. So I need to simplify the function f first off. 2 times, well, negative 2 squared. We always do our exponents first. PEMDAS, or GEMDAS. Grouping exponents, then multiply, divide, then add, subtract. So we get 2 times 4 plus 2 minus 12. And then plus 5. Really, that negative 2 plus 7. I just simplified the g, the function of g. Okay, so our last step. 2 times 4, well, that's really 8. Oops, there it is. Plus 2, well, 8 plus 2 is 10. 10 minus 2 is negative 2. So the function f simplifies all the way down to negative 2. The function g, well, it's simplified to 5. So our final answer is whatever f was, simplified to negative 2. Whatever g was, 5. Final answer, 3. So again, we need equal signs at each of those steps. So that's one way to do it. That's exactly what we were doing. Another way, I'm going to show you I actually prefer this method. We're doing the same thing, except we're having f, the function, minus g, and then we're plugging in 8 to each of those functions. Another method is you literally plug in, well, f of 8. I plug in 8 to the whole function f. And then I'm going to do the whole thing for g. I'm going to plug in 8 to the function g. At the very end, that's when I worry about, well, whatever this sign is. Minus, times, multiply, divide, add, whatever we're doing. So we're just going to do it separately and then combine our answers. That's sometimes easier to look at. Okay, so if we do that with f, we plugged in 8. 8 squared, 64. So we have 2 times 64 minus 8 minus 12. Well, 2 times 64 is 128. 128 minus 8 minus 12. Well, that actually equals 108. Okay, so the function f is simplified to 108. The function g, we plugged in 8. Well, that really means just 8 plus 7. 15. So our final answer is going to be f, that's what it starts with up here, starting with f, which we said was 108, minus g, 15. Final answer, 93. Honestly, I think the separation is easier. Yes, we had been working on combining them because we had x's involved. So we need to combine like terms. So that's when example number 7 would be easier. I think separating is easier for actually solving when we have a number instead of x in the second parenthesis. So it's saying f of the number, g of the number. So for example, number 9, f times g. And it's f of negative 1 times g of negative 1. So I'm plugging in -1 into the function f. 2 times -1 squared minus -1. Again, because of those parentheses, I'm going to see, hey, I'm going to be adding minus 12. And then we're going to do the same thing for g. So that's what's on the right. G of -1. I'm going to plug it in. Well, -1 plus 7. I'm going to do that one real quick. -1 plus 7, 6. Really nice. Okay, so we found our g. We need to find our f. Well, 2 times -1 squared, that's really 2 times 1. -1 times -1, positive 1, minus 12. Well, 2 plus 1 minus 12. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 minus 12, -9. So our final answer, oops, let me see if I can get rid of that little box. I meant to. There we go. Final answer. We're starting with the function f times g. So f simplified to -9 times g, 6. -9 times 6, -54 is our final answer. Again, I think the separation's easier. Then we're just looking at two separate equations, nice and clean. Works the same with division. 10 f of 5 divided by g of 5. That's what this is saying. The f function, we plug in 5. G function, we plug in 5. G happens to be easier, so I'm going to do that real quick. 5 plus 7, hey, that's going to be 12. Okay, now we go back and we finish f. Well, 5 squared, that's 25. So we have 2 times 25 minus 5 minus 12. Well, 2 times 25 is 50. 50 minus 5 minus 12. 50 minus 5 is 45. 45 minus 12 is actually 33. So our equation, I'm looking back at the beginning. F is on top, then G. So I'm going to put F on top. So I'm going to have 33 on top of my fraction, because we're dividing, over 12. And actually, 33 divided by 12 doesn't simplify. That's it. Nothing goes into both those numbers. So that's simplified. That's done. So operations are really nice. If there's x involved, we're completing the operation as, and then combining like terms. When there's a number, separate them. Plug in the number to each function, complete the operation. In the order from left to right that it asks. Okay, here we go. Part 2, the composition of functions. Another method for combining functions is called composition. So it's when you're given f and g, two different functions. The composition says that f, and this little circle means of, f of g of x. So when you see this little O, think of. This also means that f has g of x plugged in. G is inside of f. So we're going to be plugging in whatever the second was into the first. So we're plugging a function into another function. I promise it sounds worse than it is. So we go to number 11. Again, we've got two functions. Here's f at the top, x cubed plus 8, and here's g, x minus 1. We actually have a third because we are going to use some variables so we can see the difference. H is also 5x minus 3. Find each function. So number 11, f of g of x. So I'm plugging in g is going in to f. So we could rewrite this. G is inside of f. It's not required that you have this step, but these are two different ways you're going to see this written. So I like to write that step. So basically, the outside function, the first one, the first letter I have is f. So I always look at that function. Anywhere I see an x, I'm going to write this big all blank. But I'm going to write the rest of the function. Something cubed plus 8. There's only one x, so that's where my blank is. So the second variable was g. I'm plugging g into f. Wherever that x, that blank is, that's where I'm going to put the function g. The function g is x minus 1. So I plugged in x minus 1 into my blank. Whatever g is going inside of f. Okay, so once I've got that done, we're going to simplify step by step. Well, x minus 1 is in parentheses, and it's cubed. That means I'm taking x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1 plus 8. Since it's a binomial, I cannot distribute the exponent. So that means that I have to start by factoring x times x times negative 1, negative 1 times x, negative 1 times negative 1. When you do that and simplify, you get x squared minus 2x plus 1. So that's where this trinomial comes from. Notice we only multiplied or FOILed the first two parentheses. So I still have another x minus 1 right here, and we still have that plus 8 on the outside. Okay, but that's not done. We have a trinomial times a binomial. So again, we've got to FOIL. We're multiplying x times each of these things. And then we also have to multiply negative 1 times each of these terms. So you could use box method. I did not. I just wrote it out like we've been practicing. So I expanded it. So I got x times x squared, x cubed, x times negative 2, negative 2x, x times 1, 1x. Then I distributed my negative 1. Negative 1 times x squared, negative x squared. Negative 1 times negative 2x, positive 2x. Negative 1 times positive 1 is a negative 1. That answer is being added. Bring down my plus 8. Okay, so last step is combining like terms. X cubed has no buddy, so it's just being written. So my box is my last answer. X cubed. X squared had a buddy. I'm sorry, negative 2x squared had negative x squared. So that's where this negative 3x squared came from. Then we had positive x and positive 2x. Those are buddies. That's where positive 3x came from. And then lastly, our coefficients. Negative 1, positive 8 makes a negative 7. So final answer, x, oops, I'm sorry. Let's undo that. X cubed minus 3x squared plus 3x plus 7. Finish with combining like terms. Okay, number 12. We're going to go kind of quick. Again, h of g of x. I'm plugging g in to the h function. So I write my h function, 5x minus 3, except instead of x, nice big blank. That is where I'm plugging in the second variable. I'm plugging in the function g. So the function g is actually x minus 1 again. So I'm plugging in x minus 1. Well, you notice I have a number next to a binomial, so I'm really distributing next to the parentheses. So I get 5x minus 5, and then bring down my negative 3. Well, when I combine like terms, we get 5x, and then negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. Final answer, done. Sometimes they're not as bad as the first one. First one was a big expanded example. Okay, 13, f of h of x. So I write the function f, blank cubed plus 8. I'm going to write in my variable, my second one, my function h. So in the parentheses is going to be 5x minus 3. Sorry, little blank, little bit smaller, harder to write. 5x minus 3. Since it's cubed, that means 5x minus 3 times 5x minus 3 times 5x minus 3. So we've got a FOIL. 5x times 5x is 25x squared. 5x times negative 3 is negative 15x. But then see, I did a negative 3 times a positive 5x, so I got another negative 15x. So that's where this negative 30x came from. And then negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So that's after FOILing. Well, then I have to multiply it times a binomial. So I've got to multiply it by 5x minus 3. Whew, we get some big numbers. When I distribute 5x to each thing, I get 125x cubed minus 150x squared plus 45x. Then I multiply negative 3, and I get negative 75x squared plus 90x minus 27. So the stuff that's like my x squareds get combined, and my x. And then